He says, I'm going to take your son. And I said, take me instead.
This is Barbara, a devoted mother with an unbreakable bond with her 6-year-old son, Dale. Barbara cherished Dale more than anything and would have done anything to ensure his safety. But on November 14, 1974, their lives were shattered in an unimaginable way. That day, Dale, covered in blood and with deep marks on his wrists and ankles, knocked desperately on their neighbor's door. His mother, Barbara, had been abducted. The nightmare escalated on November 16th, when Highway Patrol Trooper Charles Eugene Campbell identified Barbara's stolen car in Perry, Florida, nearly 400 miles from their home. Trooper Campbell, who had been on the radio with dispatch, was about to pull over the vehicle when he mysteriously disappeared. By November 17th, the police were on the hunt for Paul John Knowles, a suspected serial killer responsible for over 35 murders nationwide. Knowles had crashed his vehicle into a ditch and fled into the forest. Despite an extensive manhunt, neither the trooper nor Barbara was found for over 5 months. Paul John Knowles, dubbed the Casanova Killer, had been spreading fear across the U.S., killing with a ruthlessness that left authorities helpless. His reign of terror might have continued indefinitely if not for Barbara, a woman whose survival story became legendary. Barbara, who had been born a twin, was a sharp contrast to her sister, Beverly, who suffered from cerebral palsy. Barbara's resilience and cunning were instrumental in her survival. She managed to outwit Knowles by manipulating his emotions and making him fall in love with her. Through sheer ingenuity and bravery, Barbara turned the tables on the infamous killer, ultimately escaping his clutches and bringing him to justice. Her harrowing ordeal not only highlighted her strength, but also ended the terror of one of the most notorious criminals in history.
Throughout my whole lifetime, I always called her Bevy. We both knew each other's thoughts and inner feelings. She was the smart, funny person, and I was a serious person.
Barbara and her twin sister Beverly shared a profound bond, though Beverly's cerebral palsy cast a shadow over their lives. From a young age, Barbara was fiercely protective and dedicated to ensuring Beverly could enjoy a full and happy life despite her limitations. After their father passed away, Barbara stepped up to support her mother, taking on extra responsibilities around the house with a cheerful spirit and a positive outlook. Life continued on its steady course until April 1968, when everything changed. It was a month that would shift the trajectory of Barbara's life in ways she could never have anticipated.
When I brought Dale home from the hospital, he was the light of my life. He was so beautiful. I couldn't get over hugging and kissing and singing lullabies to him. I adored my son.
After a heartbreaking split with the father, Barbara decided to raise her son, Dale, in her mother's house. It was the best decision of her life. Everything was perfect. It's May 1974, when tragedy first strikes the Mabee household. Barbara's mother dies. Both her and her sister, Beverly, are distraught by the loss. But as the months pass, they do their best to keep a lively home for young Dale, who is now 6 years old. What none of them know is that 1974 would become the worst year in all of their lives.
Thursday, November the 14th, 1974 was like any other day to me. Got ready for work, Dale went and got ready for school, Beverly got her breakfast and was happy.
After dropping off Dale at school, Barbara heads down to the radio station where she works as a copywriter.
When it was almost noontime, I tried to call my sister at home and she didn't answer. And she always answered.
At first, Barbara doesn't make anything of it and carries on with her day after work. She drives home with her son, expecting to see her sister as they both enter the house. They shout for Beverly, but get no answer.
So I said to Dale, go look for Bevy, and I'm gonna go get some water, honey.
Still goes across the house to look for his aunt. Barbara goes to the kitchen and walks up to the sink.
All of a sudden, I had this horrible feeling. I had chills going up and down my arms. Maybe it was instinct, fear, but I turned around. And I see this man with a sawed-off shotgun. I was scared to death.
At the same time, Dale runs into the kitchen and tells his mom Debbie is in the bedroom and she's bleeding.
And I said, I want to see my sister. I want to see Beverly.
As the man takes Barbara through the house at gunpoint, she grabs her son by the shoulders and holds him away from the man. When they reach the bedroom, Barbara finds her sister Beverly hidden under the covers with a gag over her mouth.
Once we loosened the gag, I put my hand on Bevy's shoulder, bent down and kissed her, told her how much I loved her and that we're going to be okay.
But when Barbara pulls back the covers from Debbie, she discovers her sister is naked.
That's when I lost it. I said, did you rape her? Because if you raped her, I'm going to kill you.
The man with a gun starts laughing. He says he tried to rape her sister, but couldn't. Terror flashes over Barbara's face for what her sister had to endure.
I said, I just cashed my paycheck. I said, I have money in my drawer in my bedroom. And I said, I'll give you the money and I'll give you the keys to my car. I said, just don't hurt us. And then he says, I'm going to take your son. No way would I let him take my son. And I said, take me instead.
Finally, the man agrees. He says his name is Paul, John Knowles, that he just escaped from prison and has no intention of going back. He tells Barbara if she does what he says, he won't hurt her. But after what happened to her sister, she knows the man is lying. All she's thinking about is keeping her son safe.
I just had to get out of the house with John and make sure that Beverly and Dale were going to be safe.
Before they leave, the man who calls himself John ties up Dale in bed with his aunt. Barbara is terrified at the thought of leaving her family behind, tied up and helpless. But she has no choice but to follow what the man says.
When he tied my son up, I told Dale to please act like a big boy. I said, we're going to be okay.
The man grabs the car keys and the money and forces Barbara out the front door at gunpoint as they drive away in her car with John in the driver's seat. Barbara is still worried about what might happen to her son and her sister, but she has no idea the danger she's put herself into. Just a few miles away from Barbara's house, police recover an abandoned vehicle. It was stolen from a man named William Bates back in September. The man's strangled body was found months later in Ohio. Inside the stolen vehicle, investigators find credit cards and insurance cards that belonged to a man named Carswell Cars.
Carswell Carr was also murdered in a double homicide along with his 15-year-old daughter Amanda in Georgia, just days before Barbara was abducted.
It was the most bloody crime scene I'd ever seen. We figured a lunatic might have done it.
The Carr home was found ransacked on November 6, 1974, nearly 500 miles away from Barbara's house. The 15-year-old girl had been strangled. Her father had been stabbed approximately 35 times. Back inside the vehicle, investigators also discovered the will of a man named Paul John Knowles. Little do they know, Knowles is a serial killer, driving aimlessly across the country, leaving bodies everywhere he stops.
Old women, children, it didn't matter to him. When he had the urge to kill, whoever was there happened to be the victim.
Knowles is suspected to have killed over 30 people in the last 5 months. And while police are doing everything they can to catch the killer, the man who left them a treasure trove of clues inside the stolen vehicle, they have no idea that Paul John Knowles is already driving away with his next victim.
We were driving along. After he heard the news, he started getting agitated. And he had me turn the stations, and I was wondering, why does he want to hear the news? And then he said, I've killed people. I was terrified. So I started talking about the weather and anything that would come into my mind to get his mind off of that newscast. And I started talking about movies, beautiful songs of the 70s. I wanted to make him fall in love with me. I was trying to save my life and get back to Beverly and Dale. So I said, honey, do you want a cigarette? And he said, why are you calling me honey? I said, why not? You're not a bad guy. I said, you remind me of Robert Redford. He said, I do? And I said, well, you kind of do. You know, you're not bad looking. After that, he was very responsive in the way I was treating him. He asked me what I did, and I told him I worked in radio, and he said, well, what do you do in radio? And I said, I'm a copywriter. He said, "Oh, you know how to write?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you think you know how to write a book?" And he told me that he wanted to be famous. And I said, "What do you want to be famous for?" And he didn't answer, and I didn't ask after that. He kept saying, "I've killed people." He was so evil. I just wish I had the guts to try to go and push him out the door, but I couldn't. I was too tired and too scared.
More than 30 minutes after Barbara was kidnapped, 6-year-old Dale managed to free himself and untie his aunt. He ran to the neighbors for help, and the police were soon at the house. Investigators, alarmed by their findings, feared the worst for Barbara, as Paul John Knowles was known to be a disturbing and unpredictable serial killer.
It appeared that he was an interstate traveler. He had a car from one place, a license plate from another place, credit card receipts and names from all over. We had learned enough about Paul John Knowles to feel that there was not going to be that much hope of finding her alive.
They have to act fast. They create roadblocks, establish a search perimeter around the entire West Palm Beach area. Everyone is on the lookout for Barbara: a stolen car, a gold-colored Volkswagen, an easily recognizable car. The problem is, Paul John Knowles has already taken Barbara beyond the perimeter after driving northbound on Florida State Road A18 for nearly 70 miles. They arrive at a motel in Fort Pierce. John says he's too tired and he needs them to stay there for the night.
That's when all hell broke loose. He parked the car in front at the office, and I said, "You can drop me off and then leave with the car." And he said, "Nope, you're coming with me."
John points his sawed-off shotgun at Barbara and forces her out of the vehicle. Barbara is terrified. She knows she has to stay calm to make sure he doesn't get triggered.
And he said, "We're married." "I'll think of a name when we get to the front desk." He said, "But we're married."
At the front office, John discreetly kept his shotgun hidden while putting his arm around Barbara's waist. He told the clerk they were Mr. and Mrs. Joe Smith. Noticing the clerk's suspicious glance, Barbara quickly mirrored John's gesture, wrapping her arm around him and pulling him closer to conceal their danger.
I wanted her to think that we were married. I figured if I said anything else, he might go ahead and kill her, and me too.
Finally, the clerk hands John the key to room 10. When they get inside, Knowles tells Barbara to get undressed right away, and she tells them she doesn't want to do anything. But he doesn't care.
That's when he decided that he had to rape me. I was thinking of Dale and Beverly and everything but being raped.
As Barbara lay helpless, struggling to distract herself from the horror, Knowles grew increasingly frustrated with his inability to perform. His anger erupted into physical aggression, and Barbara feared he was about to kill her.
I said, "What are you doing?" And he shook his head and said, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry."
Paul John Knowles is like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One minute he's calm, the next he's out of his mind. Barbara can't tell from one moment to another if she's going to be killed, and then No starts ripping the bent sheets into strips.
He tied my wrist to the bedpost, and then he went and got my ankles and tied them. I was terrified, and I was praying to the dear Lord that I'd get out of this. I said, "Let me get home to Beverly and Dale," and I was dozing off because I was so exhausted mentally and physically, and then all of a sudden I saw my mother. My mother came to me in a dream, and she was like, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. God's with you." That's when I decided that I was gonna do whatever I needed to do to survive.
Barbara wakes to the sound of the news on the television, finding John beside her, intensely focused on the broadcast. She remains silent and motionless, sensing his readiness to strike if she makes a sound. As she raises her hand to see the TV, she sees her and John's pictures on the screen, along with reports of horrific crimes, which intensify her fear. Then, she hears that Dale and her sister Bobby are safe, bringing her a flicker of relief amid the terror.
I thought, "Oh, thank God. I just started sobbing inside because I didn't want to upset Paul John Knowles.
As John decides to go to bed for the night, he proceeds to tie Barbara's ankle to his, preventing her from making any sort of movements during the night. If she wakes him up, she knows she might be killed.
Being tied up in the dark next to a killer, I couldn't get rid of the terror in my soul.
On November 15th, Barbara has been missing for over 18 hours with no leads on her or her captor. The search for Paul John Knowles has become a national sensation, with every news outlet reporting on the kidnapping of a Florida woman by the sadistic serial killer.
There are many more murders, making, in my opinion, Paul John Knowles the most heinous mass murderer in American history.
We put out a nationwide alert for that car with that license plate and the fact that it was involved in kidnapping.
Barbara's face is in every newspaper, but it might not be enough to save her. When John wakes up, Barbara has gotten little to no sleep during the night. Knowles proceeds to untie her and takes her out for a drive to a nearby restaurant.
It was like a little diner, and we get seated in. I thought, well, maybe I can get loose.
Barbara looks around for a way out, but quickly notices that John has put his shotgun beside him, hidden under his coat. Her plan to make a run for it vanishes.
Then this elderly waitress comes over and waits on us. I was thinking to myself, why isn't anybody noticing us? We were on the news last night. I just couldn't believe that nobody had seen us on TV. And I knew at that time there was nobody to help me.
She knows she has to keep on acting because he has the gun. And Barbara would not risk anyone else getting hurt if he was going to kill her. It would be her alone. After breakfast, Knowles drives Barbara back to the motel and again tries to abuse her once more. He's unable to perform, which makes him more furious this time. He is so angry that Barbara knows he is seconds away from killing her. So she does the unthinkable. She tries to calm him down.
I had to do reverse psychology and make him think that he was really great. So he would calm down and not kill me. He says, I wish I would have met you before all this happened.
After Barbara has successfully defused him, Knowles ties her up to the bed once more, saying he needs to go out and make a phone call. As he leaves, John locks the door and closes it behind him. Barbara tries her best to get rid of her ties, all the while praying for the chance to go home and see her son Dale again. This is when she notices something on the nightstand, the key to the motel room door. Knowles has locked himself out when he returns. Barbara can hear him struggling with the doorknob. She's filled with excitement, but also with fear. She doesn't say a word and waits as a doorknob shakes relentlessly, and then it stops.
And after a few minutes, through the door, Paul John Knowles said, when they pick you up, don't tell them that I hurt you, and I love you. And then there was nothingness.
Barbara stays silent, fearing Knowles might be outside the room, and waits anxiously. On November 16th at 7:30 a.m., after what feels like an eternity, she manages to free her hands and immediately calls the front desk, identifying herself and reporting her kidnapping by a serial killer. Moments later, the police arrive, and she is taken to the front desk where a phone call is waiting.
It was Beverly, and she was crying, and she says, oh my God, you're okay. We both started sobbing together, and I said, how's Dale? He's right here. Mommy, mommy, mommy. He gets on the phone. I love you, I love you. When are you coming home? I said, I'll be there in a little bit. And I said, I love you to pieces. He said, oh, thank God he didn't hurt you, Mommy. I hung up crying and sobbing for the next 15 minutes.
While Barbara is reunited with her family, she is terrified, knowing that Knowles is still out there somewhere until they catch him. She's afraid he's going to come back to her house and finish what he started. More than 200 miles north in Perry, Florida, State Trooper Charles Eugene Campbell has spotted Barbara's stolen vehicle and is pulling the driver over when he approaches the driver's seat window. Officer Campbell is faced with John Paul Knowles, who gets a jump on the officer holding his sawed-off shotgun right at his face. Barbara's gold-colored Volkswagen is left behind. The state trooper and his car go missing.
The kidnapping of a police officer, state trooper, was unheard of. That was national news.
Shortly after the patrol car was found by the side of the road, as investigators will later find out. Knowles used the sirens to pull over another driver, a man named James Meyer, a businessman from out of town. He then switched cars once again, while keeping both hostages in the back seat.
We're here trying to recover our missing trooper, which was kidnapped in the state of Florida, along with another hostage and brought into the state of Georgia.
Lakeland, Georgia, 80 miles away from where the state trooper was abducted, police get a tip from a clerk at a local gas station.
You got a civilian and you got a state trooper in uniform in the back seat with another individual, and the attendant thought something's not right about this.
Right away, the entire police workforce goes in pursuit of the spotted vehicle.
I got a call. They got Knowles cornered in Henry County. Everybody from Metro Atlanta had a badge and gun was there. I'd never seen so many cops in my entire life.
Police create a roadblock ahead of North Carr, trapping him, forcing him to crash into the blockade. He then abandons the car and continues on foot with the cops chasing him through the woods as police are closing in. Gunshots are fired, yet Knowles manages to get away until one young man out hunting in the woods spots him leaning against a tree, bleeding from a gunshot wound. Paul John Knowles has given up, exhausted from the chase.
You met him with the shotgun? And he had a shotgun. In the car. You said he could have killed you right then. Were you scared? No, not really.
Although the serial killer is finally in custody, police are shocked to see neither of the hostages are inside the crashed vehicle, and Knowles refuses to tell authorities where they are.
It was a relief to me when I saw it on the TV. I saw a magazine and it had on there the picture of Paul John Knowles, Casanova Killer, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
The news comes as a relief to Barbara and her family, but more than anyone else, she knows the man who kidnapped her and held her captive for over 36 hours has escaped from jail before. She still doesn't feel safe.
I wound up one Saturday just losing it and screamed bloody murder. And all I could hear in the distance was my son crying out to me, and I came to.
Barbara is struggling with the memories of her ordeal. She knows she needs professional help, but there's one person that more than anyone else she wishes to open up to.
I met Jim in 1973, but he was going overseas. We decided to keep in touch. You know, I started having feelings for him really early. But after everything happened, I wrote him a letter telling him several months later about the kidnapping.
When I received Barbara's letter, it really hit me hard. I knew that she probably needed someone, and then the way I felt about her anyway, I was hoping that that person would be me that could help her through it.
Barbara's greatest need is for Paul John Knowles to be stopped for good. On December 18, 1974, a month after her kidnapping, Knowles agrees to lead police to the murder weapon used on Officer Charles Eugene Campbell and James Meyer. Their bodies found tied to a tree in Pulaski County, Georgia, were shot with Campbell's gun. As Knowles, accompanied by 2 police officers, guides them to where he claims he dropped the weapon, he makes one final attempt to escape.
They loaded Knowles up in the sheriff's car and were coming down I-20 into Atlanta when Knowles secreted a paper clip and picked his handcuffs on his belly chain.
The man got a handcuff off and he went for my gun and he got his hands on my gun. And, you come to your own conclusion, but I'm pretty shook up. I know he would have taken my life.
I began firing and continued firing until I was satisfied that the danger had subsided to both Sheriff Lee and myself.
It was one of the best days of Dale, Beverly, and my life when we found out that he was killed because he could kill no more. There were several times when I wanted to move after being kidnapped, and then it dawned on me, this is Mama's house, and look at all the love. There are way more good memories in this house than there are bad. And so I decided to stay, and I built a life here for Beverly and Dale and myself.
Barbara no longer dwells on Paul John Knowles. She's written a book to share her story, and now, happily married to the love of her life, she has learned the most valuable lesson.
You can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to be a survivor. I chose to be a survivor.
Thanks for tuning in to our deep dive into this chilling true crime case. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more gripping stories. And as always, stay curious and stay safe.